Daniel Meyer, Music Director of the Erie Philharmonic, and I'm here with my friends Kieran Hanlon, Principal Bass of the Erie Philharmonic, and Ken Johnston, the Concertmaster of the Erie Philharmonic. And this is the first in a series of coffee chats. I don't have any coffee. Do you guys have anything to drink with you? Oh, good.
I have a seltzer, yeah.
Excellent. I thought this might be a good opportunity for our audience and our fans to get a chance to know us a little bit better and just talk a little bit about our lives, particularly now that we're off the stage and we don't get a chance to see our audience as often or as regularly or at all as we would like to at this point. I think at this point our symphonic season would have wrapped, but we would be looking forward to some summer activities and things like that. While lots been spending a ton of time on Zoom right now, I thought I might start off with a Zoom question. So Kieran, I know that you do a lot of teaching. I wondered if any of that had been transferable to Zoom. Are you able to interact with your students over this technology?
Yes. Well, we really have much choice, I guess, is the first answer I can give. So I work for Fredonia, just up the road from Erie, and I teach at the college and school music there. We had the directive from the governor in March that said, "You will teach online now," and that was ubiquitous, right, for everything. And so we had to make it work. So, the Zoom factor, a lot of people went that way. I actually didn't, mainly because I felt I was a little worried about, every student would have to download the program. And early on, I had some problems with connecting with other faculty members. And so we actually found that most of the students had Apple products. We were able to use FaceTime. And that was the highest fidelity audio and video. And, so we got it done, and it was all right. But yeah, it's a different kind of tired though, for doing it this way. But yeah, we made the most of it. And I'm very proud of my studio too for, having dug in and done their best and been great team players. So.
Ken, how about you? Are you doing any teaching or any musical interaction online or via Zoom or any other technology like that?
So the timing of my life is a little different with this sort of thing. I haven't been teaching really in about 3 years already because my life has been entirely formatting. So the straight answer is no, I haven't, none of the above. And which means I miss you too deeply, you have no idea. And, this has been a lot of adjustment for me. And yeah. That's the answer.
Solitude. Yeah. I haven't done any coaching or ensemble directing online. One of the things that my colleagues are complaining about at Duquesne University is the fidelity, the sound that they're able to get through. These are essentially mono channels, and let's face it, Zoom was designed for meetings. It was designed for spoken word, and with musical instruments, we're looking at much broader and wider of a dynamic range, and the colors and the textures that you can normally perceive and hear when you're in the same room with the instrument. You don't hear those sorts of things over Zoom, or it comes out distorted, or it comes out kind of in a lag. So it's almost impossible at this point. Now, I'm sure they're working on this daily to shorten the time delay, number one, between elements and people that are in a Zoom meeting. But frankly, it was never designed to house a musical interaction. So we're trying to come up with ways to combat that. I mean, next year we may even be investing in some software that the television stations use. When you have a live broadcast and there are different reporters reporting from different parts of the world, and it almost seems like it's instantaneous. There's virtually no time lag between when someone asks a question and someone responds to it. That means it's not going over a satellite, because that's the delay that you're experiencing. Is if it does bounce off a satellite and come back, and you just asked a question, you wait for like 3 or 4 seconds, which feels like an eternity, and then you finally get that answer back. So there's actually software out there that have helped create means to make the delay much smaller, imperceptible, like milliseconds instead of seconds. So we're thinking about investing in that kind of software, at least for the audio portion of what we do. But like you said, FaceTime is a good solution to some degree. But again, you're never going to get the same kind of richness and fidelity that you would get if you're in the same room.
Yeah, it seems also that I've had to sort of go for different things, in the teaching, like or maybe the better way to say it is just let some stuff go. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times I said to a student, well, I really can't tell. I can't tell about your dynamic contrast. I have no idea. But sometimes I listen for something else. Like I start to learn the program a little bit. And if someone's playing too loud, you can sort of know what that sounds like. It doesn't sound like it should live, but you can sort of feel how the computer starts to present those things. Or I watch too, if you see pressure and things like that, it's very hard to imagine going back in some strange way. I think it's going to be completely different experience having done all this.
And the other thing with Zoom is Zoom meetings, they kind of have to have their own protocol. It's, normally when you're sitting around a table with a bunch of other people, it can be much more free flow and free form, and you can finish people's sentences for them, or they can finish yours, or you can jump in when you have a salient point. And I just don't think that works so well in Zoom. Have you experienced that, Ken, when you've been in like a board meeting or some kind of multiple people on the same Zoom call?
It's very uncomfortable, isn't it? Knowing when to speak. You might have a thought, and you realize how much communication is second nature to little asides with people, to looking across at someone, maybe rolling your eyes, or you get a cue, something physical that says, okay, I'm going to step in and I'm going to say this right now. Or you get the opposite cue. You have a thought and you look at someone and you can tell, all right, I'm going to hang back here. But with Zoom, every time you speak, every time there's a noise, you're aware that you're the one with the video on you.
Yeah. And
so there's this sense that you have to compose your thoughts a little more carefully, and there's no aside, there's no other layer of communication. And I think maybe for musicians that added layer is so significant. Our whole lives are all of these nonverbal layers with people around us already, and they're all gone, and it's a difficult thing to surmount, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. It's picking up on those nonverbal cues. Even in a situation where you've got a conductor in the room, there are thousands of decisions that are made aside from what the conductor is doing on the podium. So on that very point of communication and how we're able to react on stage, one of the things that we did about 2 years ago was move the double basses of the Erie Philharmonic to the center of the stage. Right normally where we would have the French horns. And my thinking on that, of course, was I felt like the basses were playing together, but they weren't motivating the sound of the orchestra. In other words, I love my idea of sound concept for the orchestra is that it's motivated from the bass instruments, the lower frequencies of the orchestra. So the double basses and the tuba and the bassoons and the timpani. So I love to have those at center stage because then the orchestra can kind of key off of that and use that as their foundation. But of course, in solving one problem, you may create some other challenges or problems for the orchestra. And I wondered what you guys thought about that in particular and how that feels in terms of response time and what that meant for you in terms of how you might adjust the way that you react in the orchestra.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's been really fun to try it, and I think ultimately it's working well, but it's fun too, I think, to just talk about some of the things that are challenging to the players. Our audience may not always have the chance to have those conversations, and sometimes I do hear people after a concert over, they might ask me, "Hey, why are you guys sitting in the back now?" and things like that. So it's fun to talk about it. It was good to start with the challenges. Then we'll talk about the good things, right? The biggest problem for us is a logistical, physical space problem back there, which I think and hope that in the new hall or the new stage of the new hall, maybe will be less of an issue. And so we'll hope for the best on that. But we're on some risers that are probably from 1956 or something, and so it's great because we get up in the air, our sound bounces right off the wall behind us. We also have airspace underneath us, which is really helpful. All of that helps in terms of clarity of the bass sound. But unfortunately, those risers are pretty likely to vibrate. And so we catch the right frequency that at which they already want to sing, but the resonant frequency of that riser, and they'll buzz like crazy underneath us. So we get the woodwinds, turning around and get this side eye, and all that going. So that's a challenge. And the other thing that I think is probably tough for everybody is that, most orchestras here in the U.S. don't really play that way, at least in my experience, and I think we just have to listen and think differently, in many ways. I don't know, I'm curious what you guys think, but would we maybe say that over the course of time, maybe due to lackluster bass playing in days of old, the orchestras have flipped in a way that they're sort of top-led, or historically? What do you think? I don't know.
For me, it was a response time issue where I would be able to tell that the basses were all playing together as a section, and there's a unanimity there, but it was just reading a fraction late from what was happening at the front of the stage, and I was trying to solve that time lag issue, much like we try to solve when we're stuck in a warp zone in a Zoom meeting. But I hadn't thought about that, but that may be true. I mean, certainly in terms of technical virtuosity and, just instruments speaking more quickly. If you think about it, the violin's a much smaller instrument. The strings are much more tightly wound. And, you draw a bow across a string on a violin, we say it speaks very quickly. Whereas when you're drawing a bow across a string on a double bass, there's a little bit of, I don't know what you want to say, a kind of a growl, or it takes time for the sound to form. It's not necessarily as immediate as it would be on the A or the E string of the violin.
Of course, yeah. And I can't miss the opportunity to make this joke. Did you say that violinists are more tightly wound? Sorry,
could be. They're the sopranos of the orchestra.
Of course.
They get all the glory, but they also probably have the highest mental health bills.
Yeah, never know. But yeah, so if you look behind me, I've got my instruments right here, and you just see the size, of course, of the body, and moving all that air just takes some time. It's like moving any other big thing. If you think of, just say you're at a stoplight and you got a semi next to a BMW, which one's going to get going quicker? It's it's pretty straight ahead, right? So, but it's been great to be back there, and I think the orchestra is getting used to it in such a way that they might feel more than ever that they can rely on us to do our job, which is providing that harmonic rhythmic foundation.
Yeah. Now, Ken, one of the biggest duties you've been fulfilling over the past several seasons is as a musician in the Pittsburgh Symphony. And of course, that's a completely different hall, a different response time, a different set of musicians. But I think the basses are also set kind of the interior of the orchestra, behind stage as well. How does that feel from your perspective? Because you've been sitting both in the first violins and the second violins.
I have. I go back and forth pretty regularly. And as you say, the basses usually there are set differently. That might be the standard. And it's as helpful there as it is in Erie to have the basses a little bit more central. So it's always, it's a tricky thing for me because I'd love everybody to be happy where they are on the stage. And I think in Pittsburgh as well as in Erie, it's sometimes the role that is most contributing for people isn't the role that's most comfortable for them. And so it can be that people are in a difficult spot, for the basses to be the deeper or more central into the orchestra they are, the more it's like they're navigating a room with a blindfold on. It's and I hear this from Kieran as well. I can look over and I can tell he's got this sense of, I hope I'm in the right place. And I feel a little of the same thing in Pittsburgh. And unfortunately, it's so helpful to the support system, to the infrastructure, that from time to time that happens, that maybe we all need to be in that place, for the better of everyone else on the stage.
Yeah, another thing that I'll never forget, I was invited to sit back in the horn section when I worked for that orchestra, and just to get an experience of what they hear and what they understand to be their role in the ensemble when they're playing on that stage. And it was mind-blowing to me because I felt like they had to play so far ahead of the conductor's beat that it was just completely disconcerting. I didn't know how they did it. And the amazing thing, of course, was that it was unanimous. They all did it exactly at the same time, and they all did it with the same confidence that you need to do. You're essentially tricking yourself to jump in earlier than you really think you should, so that by the time your sound goes out the back of your instrument, if you think about French horns, they're actually pointed the wrong way. They're pointing toward the back, has to bounce against the back wall, and then make its way to the front of the stage. Now we're talking about fractions of seconds, but that makes a difference when you're in a live orchestral situation. I mean, it was just mind blowing to me. I couldn't believe that they were able to do it. B, felt like they were an integral part of the music making because of having to play, to my mind, so far ahead of the beat. And but ultimately, it's a survival technique. It's something that you have to do in order to make your instrument fit with all the other instruments on the stage.
Yeah, and I think one of the other big adjustments for us is listening to the front. Which in certain situations requires some educated guessing, which we might say is the same thing you're speaking about, Daniel, with the horns. Is that if we just say we're doing a Beethoven piano concerto or something, and second movement is so soft, and there's like this little stretch, and then we play the downbeat with the pianist, and I mean there are moments where we just don't, we just can't hear it. It's just not going to happen. And so of course we rely on Daniel for great information from the podium, and also you have to know the piece well enough, I think, to make a good guess. And then always don't be the first one in. That's the other trick, at least in that situation. Whereas something else you might want to be the first.
Especially with Otto. When I put a finger in my pocket, I mean, all bets are off. You can hide a lot of sins underneath the hair of a horsehair bow, but when it comes to your finger string and releasing it, it's just like
nothing more terrifying than an early pizzicato. Or the thought of an early pizzicato. Yeah, that's the stuff of nightmares right there. Audiences don't know that.
Oh, yeah. Serious.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about what your lives are like now. I mean, since we're not really preparing for a concert, we of course are planning for next season, and with all hopes we'll be back to some degree or to a full degree. We just don't know at this point. How do you keep your skills up? What do you do to stay in shape? How do you stay motivated? For me, right now, the biggest thing is motivation. If I don't know that I have a specific concert to prepare for, it's like I really have to be conscious about setting a schedule and picking pieces. And actually, I'm using a lot of this time to investigate repertoire that I didn't know or that I wanted to know more about because I have the freedom of the time. But normally, as soon as a concert's over, I'm right into the next cycle and thinking about preparing for the next concert. Ken, what sorts of repertoire, what sorts of exercises are you doing to kind of stay in shape?
So here's the thing. I've had a struggle for the past couple of years with a thumb injury. And it's mostly a relation to overwork. Honestly, for maybe 2 years, I barely had a day off from the violin at all. And the thing about being a performing player, the human body wasn't really designed to play the violin 7 days a week, day in and day out. And to be honest, even when I was in music school, I don't think I played as many hours a day as I do now. Only about twice as old as I was in music school. So, I've had a nagging thing happening with my right thumb for some time. And when all this started, I thought, maybe it'd be smart to take a little breather, maybe not play for a little bit, do a lot of listening instead, and a lot of sort of mental exploring, and pick it up from time to time and see what things are with my hands and regain some health there. And I've just started doing that. Maybe 3 weeks ago, I picked up the violin, and it was still a little bit of an issue. That right thumb was a problem. So I pick the violin up every day, and it's it's very frightening, to be honest. What I do is a little like being an athlete. If you're a track runner and you take a couple months off of running, you're quite a bit slower, and It's a difficult thing to convey what that feels like, to have lost some significant, piece of equipment in such a short time. It'll come back. It'll be just fine. But I pick up the violin, and it's like I've been knocked back quite a few years. So I'm in a place where I'm being really patient, and I'm exploring in particular how I do basics like hold the bow, how I can do things such that I can play regularly and not injure myself. And just keep in touch with a side of my brain that when I'm so busy, when life is intense, I lose sight of. And I think that's the best thing I can do is to gain awareness, and all of us do that. When we're busy, we actually narrow our focus. And that's in the end not all that healthy, right? So maybe I'm doing what we all should do right now, which is to broaden our focus, to use this time to acknowledge things that maybe we lost sight of.
That's good advice. How about you, Kieran?
Yeah, well, along the same lines, about a year ago, I did something to my shoulder, my right shoulder. And I think my theory in reverse here is that I was working in the yard, cutting out sod squares for a garden bed that we put in. And, we've got heavy clay up here, and I was using an ice pick, and I think I just might have done something. And when we played Brahms Requiem last year, the next day I was like, wow, but it was only for a day. And then several months went by, and I was playing not as much as normal as I got married, et cetera, but still playing, everything was fine. And then since September, this has nagged me, so my experience has actually been that taking time away from the bass makes it worse for some reason. I don't really know what's going on. I'm actually going to go see a doctor in a couple of weeks here, just because it's been long enough now that I'm like, okay, something might be really maybe just not right. But in any case, what I'm trying to do is sort of in the same way, Ken, just kind of recondition and reimagine certain things. I've adjusted a little bit the way I'm sitting with the bass. These guys, well, no instrument is really ergonomic, right. And we all have to find our way, conductors, everybody, right, to have good, healthy approaches, right? And over time, it's like, it sounds like I'm giving the same answer Ken's giving in many ways, but, when you're busy, you're just trucking, right? You're doing your thing, you got to keep moving. And then I think that's when these injuries can sort of happen after an accumulation of just making it happen,
For us physically, it's neck, back, and shoulders, and I know this particularly after weeks and weeks of work, and there is no rest in between. You start to feel it. It becomes painful, and it distracts you from what you really want to be doing. Of course, it's a very physical thing that we do. It's not unlike playing a sport. Yet our careers last a lot longer than a professional sports career does. I mean, they tend to knock off by the time they hit 32, 35. It's very unusual for an athlete, professional athlete, to get many more years beyond early to mid 30s. And we're asking our musicians who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, in some cases 70s, to be performing at their peak. And you're absolutely right. It's like we don't have the time normally to take care of our bodies or to think about them. Sometimes we have a masseuse that comes and helps work with our musicians during breaks at the Erie Philharmonic, but that's not a normal course. I know some musicians get some regular massage and take care of their bodies in that way, but this time for me has been great in terms of resting my body and my muscles. But the thing about the mental game, you want to stay on top of your mental game. I've just been trying to solve that by staying engaged in the repertoire. And frankly, a lot of my time is spent making sure our orchestras survive beyond this period. That's a stressful aspect of what we're doing right now, is just to remind everybody how important it is to have art and music in their lives, and how important it is to keep these institutions alive, so that when we're out of this pandemic, we have the beauty of great orchestral music and classical music going forward. But not to bring things down, I definitely want to do that. I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about some hobbies or some things that you're investigating or exploring recently, or binge watching, or anything you're reading. Ken, is there anything um, on your playlist or something you binge watch recently or a guilty pleasure?
Too many things.
Too many
things. So a few shows every night. I watched all of Ozark.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic show. And a friend of mine alerted me to a sort of British Cockney-ish show called Peaky Blinders, which is a fantastic little sort of segue if you're into a thing like Ozark. And that's a good relief from the rest of my days, which are actually relatively intense still. When I was a kid, played a lot of chess. And so that's sort of come back into my life lately. And, the other thing, you might laugh, I've been learning some computer coding.
Oh, cool.
So Java and such. And I don't have a straight answer as to why. I think it's part of my sense of trying to gain awareness of sort of visiting, this huge garage, which is my soul, and shedding light on things that for so many years maybe I've lost touch with, or I mentioned the narrowing of focus. Maybe I've seen one or two aspects above all the others, and lately this will be the time that I try to look at as much as I can, and when I come back to regular life, maybe I've learned a thing or two.
Yeah. How about you, Kieran?
Yeah, it's well, I don't know, Ken. I'm not sure how to speak about it after that. The garage that is my soul, man. That's a great way to say it. Well, I spend time in the garage that is my garage. And I just love doing projects, and things like that. And so, in fact, this space rack I built right at the beginning of the pandemic. Usually these guys live at school in my office, and teaching from home, doing everything from home. I had to come up with a solution, and we have a decent sized house, but not a big house, in any way. And so these guys go down on the floor, and that's a whole room, So things like that I really enjoy doing. Between school and things we've been doing here with the Philharmonic, it's actually in some strange way still pretty busy. We've just wrapped up school last Friday, and I'm not feeling really as celebratory as I usually do, at the end of the school year, because it's just sort of anticlimactic or something, But anyway, yeah, I'm trying to let this week be whatever, and then I'll get into a bit more of a scheduled thing next week. But yeah, in terms of hobbies, I love building, and then I have one that's really left field as well. If you think of people, it's probably most common thing of people doing model train work. I do that with farm equipment and buildings, trucks, tractors, things like that. Really, really tiny, like this, like this big, and I love doing that, and it's complete 180 from, of course, my professional life. So
you don't happen to have any of those around you now, do you?
I do not. They're in the basement, but you can imagine, I'm sure.
What do you make them out of?
Well, they're actually it's more like customization work to things that are already made. So you can buy parts of things like mirrors and lights and handrails and things like that, and it's like super tiny gluing, and it's some kind of incredible motor skills exercise as well, with super glue and these parts that are, as big as like a dot on my fingers sometimes, and so it's interesting. Yeah. I
have to admit, I'm a little curious to see them. So I vote that we do this again, and maybe you line them up. I want to see what these look like.
All right. Well, we can talk about that. Sure. Yeah.
We'll have a what I did on my summer vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I guess my analogy would be art projects with my 6-year-old son. He's
Cool.
Just wrapping up his kindergarten year, and a lot of what they do is expressing themselves through art. And I love it. It's really, really fun.
Maestro, you just knocked the wind out of me. I'd forgotten that he would have been 6 already.
Yeah. It's just kind of mind blowing, and it's just fun because he's game for anything really. As long as he's active, and now that we've kind of instilled that love, or he's kind of fostered that love. Now when I'm fixing dinner or we're doing something else in the house, he'll sit with some paper or a pencil or set of paintbrushes and just go to town. And he doesn't even necessarily need a model. He can just kind of start drawing geometric shapes or patterns, or he's really into symmetry now. And it's fun to watch him explore that way. And I have found it therapeutic just to sit down and do some projects with him, because it's something completely other than what I do in my normal life. And it really just takes my mind off things for a while. So it's been a lot of fun. But I want to take this opportunity to thank you guys for sharing your time with us and sharing a little bit about your lives and what's going on. Ultimately, what I hope we can do is just connect a little bit better with our audience and let people understand the lives of the musicians that they get a chance to admire and enjoy on the stage when we all play together as the Erie Philharmonic. So thanks to you both. And looking forward to staying in touch with you over this time. And believe me, we want to get back playing as soon as we can, because we have spent our lives devoted to mastering our instruments and our love for this music. And this is our reason for being, at least from a career standpoint. So we would love to get back to playing.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it. And best wishes to everybody at this tough time, and with hopes that we see you one way or the other in the fall. So
thank you both. Let's do this again, please.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks, Kieran.